Welcome to the Manders Mindset podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Welcome back to Manders Mindset, where we explore the power of shifting your mindset to shift your life. I'm your host, Amanda Russo, and I am here today with Janessa, and she is an empowerment coach guiding leaders, healers, and high achievers to overcome obstacles in molding their mindset. She also has over 20 years of experience in the field of behavioral modification. And I am so excited to speak with her today. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So that's an awesome bio, but who would you say Janessa is at the core?
Well, I am an athlete, a farmer's daughter, an adventurer, and I feel like there's something about love, like just a loving being for other people, for life. But man, it was a journey to get there. I think that was, all of our natural state when we come in and then we experience life. And then it's the unlearning and returning to our true essence.
I gotcha. Now, can you take us down memory lane a little bit? Tell us about your foundation, childhood, family dynamic, however you'll go with that.
Yeah. So I grew up in Northeast Nebraska. Nebraska's a flyover state for people who don't know, because a lot of people will ask me if it's a city. It's a whole state in the middle of the United States. And I call it the land of cows and corn. So I grew up in a farming community, very rural, country girl. And I went to a country school. So a one-room schoolhouse in the middle of nowhere. It was actually about 2/3 of a mile from our house. I got to ride my bike up the hill. My parents could watch me get there and come home. When I was just, I think I was 5. I started riding my bike there because my brother was in school, and I would go for noon recess when I wasn't actually a student yet, and then come back home at noon. It was fantastic. So that and the animals, all of the baby calves, the baby kittens, the baby animals on the farm, the baby chickens, those were my favorite. I've always had such a soft spot for animals. So that was really, the context of my childhood, growing up on a farm, traditional Catholic family, very little cultural exposure. And I went to the country school for 2 years before it closed, and then I attended public school that was bigger, but not a lot bigger. At the country school, I didn't have any kids in my class. I was actually the youngest, so kind of the baby of the family, and it really was more of a family dynamic there in terms of no bullying, looking out for one another, and then going to a true public school in town, that first exposure to bullying and just kind of the real culture of school and education is very different. Even though there were usually like 18 to 21 kids in my entire class, and we had one of the larger classes in the school. So pretty small, sheltered upbringing, I would say. I, at the age of 8, experienced a trauma that I repressed and didn't know about until decades later. So in sharing that, it's a little out of chronological order, but throughout my upbringing, I really struggled with relationships with other people, very defiant, very sassy and spicy personality. And I loved athletics, and I feel like that really kept me balanced with what was really churning under the surface that I didn't even know was there. So at almost 18 years old, I developed an eating disorder. I was anorexic and bulimic. I went on to college for criminal justice and psychology. And before I graduated, I got married at 21, graduated college while we were married. And we were just married for 1 short year and divorced largely because of the eating disorder, codependency. I wasn't honest about the eating disorder. And so just really struggled with relationships continuing in life until I started my healing journey. And it was a couple years into actually the personal development and healing path when I remembered the trauma and those repressed memories. And then things really started unraveling for me and understanding why family dynamics, relationships, keeping people at arm's length while really wanting something much deeper with people, not trusting, all of these themes that had been such a profound part of my relationships have been so present for so long. But in the midst of all of that, I began my career in the criminal justice field. I worked in the prison. I was the first female assistant team lead on the emergency response team. So they would get activated for like riot suppression, but we would also do mass shakedowns, which is moving inmates out of a whole living area to a community like the chow hall, and then going through all of the rooms unannounced in that entire housing unit for safety. So we would do things like that just to ensure the safety and good order of the facility. Being the first female leadership role was very interesting, and especially at such a young age. I reflect back now being where I am, and I'm like, man, at the age I was working there, barely 25, the brain's just getting to be fully developed. And I'm like, that's a lot of responsibility for such a young individual. But I didn't see it that way at the time. It was an adventure. So from there, I worked in probation, drug court, and then the Department of Homeland Security. So I had a long career in the criminal justice fields, and a lot of my work was with individuals whose underlying issue was addiction. Obviously, that's so in drug court, but even with probation, people who were on probation, their charges may not have been drug related, but they were dealing with an addiction. And so a lot of addiction work and that behavioral modification piece and helping people, that's always been a deep passion of mine. And then eventually, while I was working for the Department of Homeland Security, I began training in energy psychology. I had someone say, oh, hey, you might want to use this for your own healing path. And before I went to the training, 2 people asked to have sessions. They just wanted to experience that they hadn't heard of it before, and both said it was life-changing. And that's when I realized there was something more to this than just simply learning it for my own benefit. And then that path of healing and coaching and helping people through a business unfolded for me on its own. And that brought us to the present day.
I want to backtrack a little bit, but you mentioned you had a brother, older, younger.
Yep, I have one older brother. He's 2 years older.
Now, you mentioned you went to the country school for 2 years, then you transitioned to public school.
Yeah.
And you said the public school, you got exposed to bullying. Did you experience bullying? Did you see the bullying?
All of it. I definitely experienced bullying. I would say even humbly at certain points in time, not wanting to be the one being bullied. I wouldn't bully people, but I wouldn't speak up and stop it either. And so I kind of felt like I was a bystander or a participant by being passive to it, knowing that that was really hurting someone else and knowing what that hurt felt like. And a lot of the bullying in our school that I witnessed was a lot of seclusion, isolation, excluding people, especially with such a small class size. And I think there were 6 girls in my class when I graduated. So a lot of males in our class, there weren't a lot of females to be friends with at a young age growing up. And that's the other really interesting thing about growing up in such a small community. I have 2 friends that I met like in kindergarten still to this day, which is charming and amazing, and I adore them. But you don't necessarily choose your friends in a small community. You have peers. And then you find common ground or you don't. It's just very different than being in a large community. And I see you like laughing and kind of almost
No, I get what you're saying because no, I didn't grow up in Nebraska, but I went to a Catholic school growing up. And my eighth grade graduating class, there was 12 of us. And there were 4 girls, including myself. And like, I would tell the joke, if I didn't like these girls, I wouldn't have friends. So like it was, you have these girlfriends or you don't have girlfriends. They were nice girls, but it was one of those that I also lived in a different town than the school was. So I didn't know the kids in the town. And so I get what you're saying, like it, you were almost forced. I don't want to say forced. I don't like that word, but like it's who was there to be your friends, because like you mentioned, it was just the peers. So
yeah, it feels a little more unchosen, doesn't it? Versus we're chosen. Yeah. Like there's a choice. You can be friends with nobody, but
that's true. But as that kid growing up or even that adolescent, you want to belong. Like people want to have that feeling of belonging. So how was that for you, not having a lot of options for friends?
I have to say what I know now, I think it was all a divine intervention because I had all of that trauma under the surface. I think that if there were more individuals to choose to be friends with, I don't think my story would have played out any differently because I don't think I had the capacity to really truly connect with people. So I think my story would have written much the same of feeling like an outsider and feeling like the black sheep and feeling excluded. How much of that was me versus the individuals I was growing up with?
Now, that feeling like an outsider and feeling excluded, what do you think that was caused from?
I think it was caused from the trauma that I experienced and then the impact that had on my relationships thereafter. And the subconscious stories that come in, limiting to identities that come in as part of those traumatic experiences. So that was a definite pivotal point in my younger years that didn't unravel until much later in life.
You said you repressed that for a while.
Yeah.
And how did that come to the surface for you?
It was during a alternative energy psychology healing session. And it just came in. And I'm like, I think this happened. But how would I not know this happened my whole life until right now? And so I fact checked the day with my parents and I'm like, did we do this and this and this and this with these people? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, if all of the other memories are accurate, how could that one part of the memory be inaccurate? So.
Now, so you said alternative energy psych session. What is that exactly?
Well, it's using the psychology principles and theories and incorporating the energetics of our being. So, we know emotions are energy in motion. We also have chakras and an aura and an energy field. Like we are energy beings. And so it's really leveraging the totality of us versus just mind or emotions, including the body, and where the stuck emotions get stored in the nervous system and in different parts of our body from the things that we've experienced in the past, and being able to release and unravel all of it versus a cognitive approach to mind and emotion and mental health. So it's more of a holistic approach that cares for our whole being, mind, body, and soul.
I gotcha. And how old were you when you did this and this came up? About, we'll just ballpark 35. I think it was a little bit before that, but yeah. It was over 20 years later that this came up for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like closer to 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I lived much longer, even to this day, much longer not remembering and doing all of these subconscious coping strategies under the surface than what I have been like, oh, this happened and now I can deal with it and I can adjust and I can create something different in my life, which has been really beautiful. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Now, I want to backtrack again. You mentioned an eating disorder that you developed, and then you got married, I believe you said after the eating disorder or around that?
Yeah.
And how did all of that unravel?
So with the eating disorder, my senior year in high school, my cousin was the first person to talk to me about it. So he was 4 years older than I was. And we've always had more of a brother-sister dynamic. But he showed up at a basketball tournament over the holidays. And he pulled me aside and he's like, hey, I know you have an eating disorder. And here's the book. Like, I really want to support you. I want you to get the help you need, whatever. And so that was the first part of it unraveling. But as with so much addiction, I was very dishonest about it with family, parents, even when I went on to college, roommates, people I lived with. I played softball my freshman year in college as well. I was demanding a lot from my body physically while not fueling it properly. With that much activity, I did get awfully thin, but I just wouldn't give it up. Like, I was a true addict. I wouldn't give it up. I'm like, nope, I'm fine. I'm good. Things are fine. It's all under control. And so even within the marriage, like I said, I was really dishonest with it. And I was having terrible anxiety, quite honestly. And that's what prompted me to make a different decision. I started counseling, and she suggested that I do a month of counseling just for myself and then work on the marriage. And I chose to move out during that time to focus on my own mental health and my own well-being. And then the divorce was filed. He filed for divorce and sent me the papers. And I moved in with my cousin, the same cousin who came to me and said, hey, you know, you have an eating disorder. Here's the book. And so from there, I continued on my path, trying to get well on my own. I didn't stick with counseling after the divorce was filed. And once I got the position in the prison, I bought a house on my own. So this was probably almost a year and a half after the divorce, approximately. Anyway, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do if I have to go to residential treatment to get my poop in a group. Like, I don't want to lose my house. I worked really hard, especially after going through a divorce. Like, that's emotionally so challenging. And then financially to pay off that debt and to start over and to, you know, buy a house. And I'm like, I don't want to lose it all. Like, I kind of feel like that was losing it all in a way when going through the divorce. I don't want to do it again. And so I started reading books, and there was a workbook. I don't remember the name of it, but there was a workbook that was really, really, really pivotal for me. It really made me look at myself, my childhood, things I'd experienced, because I still didn't know about the trauma. That really was the source of a lot of my self-sabotage. So I did quite a lot of healing. I didn't go into any treatment, and I don't recommend listeners out there that if you are dealing with an eating disorder or addiction, there's an easier way. Please hear me. There's an easier way than going it alone. Turning 25, you know, getting to that place where your brain is fully developed. And the closer I got to that, the healthier I got. That workbook made a huge difference. I had some really tough conversations with my parents about how I felt about different things in my childhood, and they were incredibly receptive and loving. And that was very healing. I just finally got to a place where I was secure enough that I didn't need to cope with I didn't need to make myself numb every single day is essentially what was happening. I would just make myself numb to everything. And I finally got to a place where I could start dealing with life on life's terms, as they say.
How would you say you were able to start dealing with life on its terms?
I definitely relied a lot on working out, which has always been very therapeutic for me. And I know people out there listening to this and they're like, wait, she said she had an eating disorder and she's coping with life by working out, but it really grounded me. And I feel like I had a couple pivotal relationships in there of people who just loved me no matter what, just for who I was, whatever I was experiencing. And it was really growing more secure with myself in being who I was. Long, long way still from where I am today, but enough to where I did not need to use food as a way to get through every single day.
I like how you mentioned that you moved out when you started doing counseling by yourself. Environment is a big thing. People will talk about it, but I don't think people fully understand it. Like if you're in the wrong physical environment, it can affect a lot of areas of your life.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to say like my husband or that environment was the problem, but it was the problem in the fact that, as they say, you can't get well in the same environment that you're ill. And so I was having severe anxiety. I was sleeping for a couple hours at night at most. And I really felt like I was unraveling and coming undone. And so for me, it was more about, like I almost in reflecting feel like I was trying to escape myself. And of course, I went back to the individual who was like, hey, I see there's an issue here. You need help. So there was just more support or structure. And because he could see through my lies, or he was bold enough to risk the relationship to call me on my lies. But yeah, the environment definitely was, for me, more about I wasn't going to get well in the same space where I was unwell. Pivotal.
I gotcha. So you moved out from there, and then from there, post that, you're living in your own house.
Working, relationships, so like maybe make it to 3 years. As guys either did not get past 3 months with me, or if we did, we didn't get past 3 years. So I had this repeated pattern with relationships as well. So there were about, not quite, but almost 20 years between the ending of my first marriage and getting remarried a second time. So in between that was a lot of what felt like professional success at the time, and a lot of personal development and healing and fun. I traveled a lot and, enjoyed life too. I feel like sometimes when I tell my story, because of their trauma, there are aspects that were so heavy, but my whole life has not been really hard and challenging and filled with adversity either. There have been, depending upon who I was dating, very externally defined as a person until really coming to know myself. And so the person that I would date or partner with really influenced my lifestyle, the things I chose to do, those types of things. Not anymore, but in my younger years, definitely. So with that, there's a lot of traveling and snowboarding and lots of fun things in different chapters and eras of Janessa's story.
That's like you mentioned that just life is a constant process going through all the experiences. I don't think there's a bad experience. A lot of people may disagree with me on that, but I think we're meant to experience all of it. The good, the bad, the in-between. Like you won't know your happiest day if you don't experience your saddest day.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that everything in our life points us to either where we're trying to get or the resources, tools, knowledge, wisdom that we need to get to where we want to get, like you're either gathering resources or you're checking the box and reaching the goal. Like everything is an opportunity if we allow it to be, versus saying, I'm on the wrong path. This isn't right.
Is there something that helped you begin to believe that everything is an opportunity?
Well, we had a small conversation about this before we jumped on the recording. For me, honestly, the universal laws were really eye-opening for me in that regard, because as I've mentioned, had some healing work to do, did a lot of healing work over the years. But then there were things that my beliefs worked against me. And because my beliefs weren't aligned with the laws of the universe or the laws of nature, and we are beings of nature, humans are nature too, even though some people might not look at that way, but we are. When we're living in contrast to the laws of the universe or the laws of nature, were outside of our design. And so for me, really coming to know those laws and then aligning my thinking with them shifted so much. And I stopped creating more healing to have to do. For instance, one example of that is just coming to understand that our negative emotions really promote our growth. They aren't something to ever try to stop or get rid of. And I have the misbelief that I would be healed or I would be enlightened as a human when I no longer had negative emotions. And that's just not true because of the law of polarity. There's, like you just mentioned, like the happy and the sad or the bad or however you want to label it. You can't have one without the other. And so it's really in mastering the art of being human, knowing that your negative emotions have immense wisdom for you. They have such positive intentions for you too. If you sit and learn to dialogue with them and give them an opportunity to, express why they're there, what they have to offer, and then process them. So you don't store them, you don't harbor them, and take that inspired action through what your negative emotions are, the wisdom that your negative emotions are offering you. You're going to grow and you're going to expand. And so feel all of the feelings, not just the good feelings, really truly feel those negative feelings as well and embrace the learning process to process them. And that's one thing that I love about this current day and age. And when I was a kid, there was nothing being taught on how to process emotions whatsoever. And there are so many different ways to regulate your nervous system, to deal with those emotions, to move beyond what, I'm a feeler. Thinkers might not relate to this quite so much, but as a feeler, like I would have emotional tornadoes come through and there is no thinking until the feelings are calmed. And I didn't know how to do that. And so that, just fed the eating disorder as well. There's so many tools to process our emotions. There is no reason to not embrace that process and give ourselves that gift because it does make us stronger. And it's interesting, the more you feel your negative emotions, I believe the longer periods of positive emotions you'll have. Because when you really go into the depth of the feeling and you understand why it's there, what it's offering you, what wisdom it has, doing that alone dissolves the majority of feelings. There was actually a study by, I want to say it was Harvard, but it was one of the big name schools, elite schools, proved that to be true. Just simply truly identifying what emotion you're feeling rather than having the response like, I don't have time for this, or I'm frustrated, or I'm angry, but really going into it, that alone will dissolve the emotion. So yeah, honoring ourselves with that and knowing that the truth, like trusting the wisdom of your emotions and the truth of your body. So where you're having pain, that pain is talking to you about something, or wherever you have sensations, all of that is trapped emotions or something going on that is offering you information. And your body is your truth if you tune in and trust it. And then allow those emotions to be set free rather than continuing to tote them around like luggage in the physical body.
Yeah. I love that study. That is so fascinating to me. It makes a lot of sense. I talk all the time about any behavior or habit or whatever it is, like nothing can change if we're not aware of it. So like even if that's an emotion, that makes a lot of sense. If we're not aware of what we're feeling and why we're feeling it, how can you change it? Because you don't know it exists.
Or the mornings that you just wake up and you feel off, right? And so we're like, oh, I just feel off. Well, off isn't a feeling. I'm sorry. It's not an emotion. So if we don't actually take the time to identify like, oh, okay, well, what exactly is off? Does off mean I'm discouraged? I'm feeling despair? Like what is in there if we just, and I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to speak for other people, but I did that for a lot of years. And like, nope, my calendar is booked. I'm packed. I don't have time for this today. This is just slowing life down. Let's keep it moving. And that is really just rejecting and repressing these aspects of ourselves. And when you build that habit then that's what you do. But if you build the habit of like, okay, I'm actually going to show up for myself this way. I'm going to honor myself. I don't actually want to feel off. I know I can feel balanced. What's going on in here? And get curious. It makes life a lot easier. It just takes a few moments. And the more you do it, the shorter amount of time it takes to get to that place where it dissolves and unravels too. In the beginning, yeah, it's going to take more than a few moments. Totally worth the investment of your energy and your time, though. And yeah, the rest of your day and week and life. And then you start building those habits, if you will, for the nervous system and the brain pathways, the neural networks, to be able to hold that space for yourself. And it just happens quicker and quicker.
I love how you said, get curious. I think approaching it from that curious, like, just why am I feeling this way? Or what do I mean by I'm feeling off? Like, in seeing what comes up, like whether you journal about that, whether you reflect on it, and just not approaching it from like a negative place. Even if it is a negative emotion, and just approaching it from that, even if it's not positive. But I like how you said curious, and just seeing what this is, seeing why this is here.
Yeah, I think curiosity really lends to opening the door to being comfortable in our discomfort, and to understanding that discomfort never ceases. I feel like a lot of people I've worked with believe that if they do enough personal development work, they'll get to a place where that being uncomfortable, whether it's negative emotions or, whatever form of discomfort it is for them, is going to go away. It's going to cease. And really, we become masters of adversity and viewing it as adventure, and knowing that when we're outside our comfort zone, there is going to be discomfort, but that's also when there's growth and there's expanse. And so when the comfort comes and the discomfort ceases, I believe that it's just stagnation or a plateau. Like, you've just reached a place where you're comfortable. And if you stay there and if you don't continue to grow, then yes, you'll be comfortable. But if you're always moving on to the next goal, to the next up level of yourself, the next iteration of yourself, when you do so, there's going to be discomfort. And the law of opposites also indicates and tells us and teaches us that most often when we reach the next level, the next frequency, the next vibration, the next iteration, whatever you want to call that, whatever it is to you, you're going to encounter the opposite of what you're actually trying to create. And this is a sign that you're on the right path. And it's going to come with that discomfort because it's a little bit of a test. Are you sure you have the capacity for this? Are you sure you can process through this? Are you sure you can handle the challenges that is on this path? Because the more you up level, actually, the bigger the challenges get. And so you have to have a bigger capacity to handle the challenges. So, Amanda, I invite you, if you look back on what used to like really stress you out, is it like no big deal these days? Yeah. And that's just how it works. And so then the things that are a big deal are generally a bigger challenge because you've reached a new level and you're going to be met with the opposite first. As long as you can just keep your chill and deal with the obstacle and keep moving, you're going to get to that goal that you have set for yourself. It's just a matter of time. But the discomfort never stops and is actually a sign that you're on the right path.
I agree with that. Now, again, curious, did something happen to make you realize that the discomfort never ceases?
Great question. So for me, personally, in my path, I mentioned, the trauma several times, but there were a lot of events in my life that continued to be traumatic, like eating disorder, car accident, like a lot of things that we haven't really gotten into. And so it was a trauma after a trauma after a trauma. And I think that was part of my healing path and really recalibrating my nervous system to allow things to be good. and to not make it mean, because our brains make a meaning out of absolutely everything we ever experience in life, but we get to choose what that meaning really actually is. And so for a long time, I allowed the meaning to be something negative about me, that I was on the wrong path, that I wasn't doing things right. And again, like healing. And I'm like, at what point? Like, I get the healing lifestyle. I'm here for it. I'm not saying I want to ever stop my growth or development, but at what point do I stop telling myself I'm doing things wrong? Or at what point do I believe that I'm doing things right? And so in being able to recalibrate this concept that, oh, the law of opposites actually tells us that we're going to encounter these challenges and that it does mean you're on the right path. And I do want to grow and I want to evolve and I want to reach new goals and I don't want to necessarily stagnate. Because the only thing that made sense without continuing to make my life more complicated. At one point, a couple years ago, my then fiance was investigated. And it's a really long story of a crime that, I believe upon looking at evidence and all of the things and all of the story, he didn't commit. But I had a real choice before me. And it was, am I going to take the easy path and leave because we're not married yet? And I could. And if I did, is that unconditionally loving someone? Or am I going to walk this path that is not going to be easy? But I have all the tools to do it. And I believed also at the time there was quite a lot of attack on the family, and I refused for my family to be torn apart. And so that was also a pivotal time of like, I didn't actually create this challenge, but I'm going to choose to walk through the challenge. And I know that it's life happening for me. And I don't know what is here for me. It seems like a mountain to move, quite honestly. But, I came out the other side so much wiser and really taking like the universal laws and laws of nature and living in alignment with God and spirit and all that we are as humans. I really mastered the art of being human and knowing that adversity can be adventure and it doesn't have to be this story, this negative meaning about me not being a good person or whatever else I used to make it mean. But actually it's strength and character and, empowerment and choice. And having choice is one of the most beautiful things that we can have in this life. But oftentimes we tell ourselves we don't have a choice, kind of like our conversations coming full circle where we kind of started with elementary school and the friends. Did we have a choice or didn't we? We like to surrender our choice an awful lot rather than standing in our power and saying, no, I do have a choice here. And I'm choosing this path, even if it's the harder one.
That's really true. I like how you mentioned you didn't create the challenge, but you're choosing to walk through it. I like that. I think that's true for a lot of people. Challenges will show up in our lives, and sometimes we have the choice. Like, are you going to walk through it, or are you going to turn your back and go the other way? And it'll show you a lot, if you have the courage to walk through the challenge, whatever the challenge is, and getting to the other side of that. I love that you mentioned that, and not making meaning out of it, because so many of us do that with everything. Like, everything's a story, what we're telling ourselves from what other people will think, what other people will say, or even what we're saying to ourselves. And maybe it just means this is just the situation. It doesn't have to mean anything at all. It could be just that simple. This is just what it is.
Yeah, a big part for me was getting out of my head. And this is where I feel like counterintuitively, a lot of mindset work is actually about thinking less. Do less thinking, trust your heart more, trust your intuition more. And so I did, think and wrestle, and there was some logic around what I just shared. Like, if I want unconditional love, but I'm not willing to give it, am I ever going to get it? Probably no. But I also trusted my intuition, and my intuition was calling me to remain steadfast by my partner's side. Even when all of everything started, I'm like, how dare you bring this into our family and our relationship? And there was a lot of shame flaming. How dare you? But once I was able to process through the trauma of it, thank goodness I have the tools that I did, I was able to get really still and centered and in meditation, and my closest friends who walked with me through this situation, I'm like, I just cannot shake this feeling. Like, logically, I would prefer to take the easy path. But intuitively, in my gut and in my heart, like, I feel as though I am being called to this situation for something that I don't yet see and I don't yet understand. And I still, to this day, don't necessarily see all of those pieces of the puzzle in place yet, but collected a lot more puzzle pieces than where I started for sure. And I think that's part of the adventure, right? Like, this is where I could sit in this space of adversity and, it almost destroyed us and it almost destroyed our relationship and it almost destroyed our home. Or I could sit there and look at, well, I know this now and I know this now. And on the adventure, I've picked up, 35 more puzzle pieces. When's the next one coming? I'm really excited to find out. And trusting my intuition and those emotions, like we talked about earlier, that offer us so much wisdom. And stop the mind maze, because our mind will take us through a crazy labyrinth and it only wants logical, rational things. Some things in life, I think there's a saying, are meant to be experienced or felt rather than, thought about, and for it to make logical, rational sense. I also want to say that the mind, if we do use rational, logical thinking, we're going to get linear results. And so people who want, this quantum leaping is quite the trendy little saying, but the people who want the supernatural, unexplainable miracles in life, those come from following your intuition, because your intuition quite frequently won't be nudging you to do things that you're excited to do. They're the things that stretch you. You're like, I'm not sure I want to do that. And the intuition won't let up unless you're just like, absolutely not, I'm not doing it. It'll keep nudging you. And when you follow through, that's when you get those, the miracle, the quantum leaps, the unexplainable.
Yeah. Now, you say the mindset work is less about thinking. So why do you say it's less about thinking?
Well, because linear results, like I just mentioned. Also because I'm sure I would imagine you've talked about this on your podcast before, but the subconscious, conscious mind. So our conscious mind, it does the thinking, it does the decision making, it thinks, but it only has about 5% influence over what we're actually choosing, because the subconscious, the beliefs that are stored there, the emotions, all of the past experiences and the meaning that we've made about them are held in the subconscious. And so our cognitive, logical thinking brain doesn't do as much as it likes to think it does. And it actually doesn't also hold the key to being able to do the things we want to do. And so that's where really we need to tune into what's in the subconscious and having methods to rewire and refire our subconscious. It's so important to listen to all of the intelligence centers in our body, not just the brain, because the heart is very wise and so is the gut. And we are equipped with 3 centers of intelligence that offer very different kinds of intelligence. So just be a fully empowered human with all of the gifts we're given.
So what would you suggest for anybody to start thinking less and get more in tune with their heart, their gut, their intuition?
One really easy exercise people can embrace is making a decision in like 10 seconds or less. And don't start with high stakes decisions. But just like on tests, right? Like you have a multiple question answers And they say your first thought is generally the right thought. But then you'll sit there and you'll think about it and you'll think yourself into a different answer. And then you generally end up being wrong. So don't start this out with high stake decisions. Maybe do it when you go to a restaurant, look over the whole menu, and then give yourself, once you've taken in all of the information, make an informed decision. But once you've taken in all the information, make a decision in 10 seconds. It's incredible to discover that successful people actually make decisions really quickly and change their mind really slowly. And when we don't make decisions, we put them off. That's like leaving programs running in the back of your computer, and it slows things down. You're leaving like open loops of energy for yourself. And so just starting with your decision making and doing it really quickly and trusting your inner guidance, that's a great way to start building that intuition.
I like that, the decision making. And I like that you mentioned as well, don't start with life altering ones. Because it would be harder to lean into the intuition, especially at first with the bigger decisions.
And especially if you've been making decisions in a certain way. And I still to this day, when I am certain what my decision is, I still like to sleep on it so that I know I'm not doing anything out of impulse. That's for me. That's not for everybody, but that is for me. And so people who want to do you need to make a decision right now, because it is true, like our brain is going to tell us no. And then it's going to tell us all the reasons that we don't want to do something in between the initial no and committing to the decision. But I know that's how my brain works. So I know everything else that it offers me, which is garbage generally, lets me know where my area for refinement is. And so it's more information. And I have the confidence and certainty in myself that I haven't done anything impulsively. And so I feel like for me, sleeping on it is just gaining more wisdom and understanding of myself and honoring, space. Space is a part of luxury. Luxury, there's always space. They're connected. So that's what feels luxurious to me, is having a little space and time to make a decision. But I understand the component of success, and I absolutely have trained myself to listen to what is my initial response to this? And then also with my intuition, it keeps nagging me until I just do the thing too. So it's how long do I want to stay in that discomfort that never ceases? And am I creating it for myself because I'm not making a decision? I think this is part of mastering the art of being human as well, is understanding your own rhythms and your own cycles. And for me, that's mastering my decisions. If it's a high stakes decision or a high investment, there's going to be one sleep involved. And I'm going to know both where's my growth edge so that I'm completely centered and in my power as I make this decision, and the confidence in making the decision because I know it's right for me. And we just have to learn ourselves and our cycles, our rhythms, and what's right for us. Because it's right for me doesn't mean it's right for you.
Yeah. When I even like how you mentioned there, I know you were joking a little bit, but about that could keep you in the discomfort longer, not making the decision. So many of us get caught up in, regardless of what the decision is. Sometimes it's bigger things, but sometimes it's even small things like, should I stay at this job? That could be a bigger decision, but how often are you thinking about quitting that job that you don't want to be in, and you were sitting in that discomfort for so long? It's okay, yeah, you got to work. Yeah, you got to have money coming in, but you don't have to be doing what you're doing. It's make a decision because you could be causing yourself more discomfort,
Yes, absolutely. And it goes back to what you had said earlier about awareness. How aware are you of what your brain is offering you? And are you aware of how the brain works? And so where I know how the brain works, I recently bought a new car, and I did it in a really unconventional way, a way I've never done before. So I sold my car privately, which I have done before, but not before I had the other car picked out. And so I had a friend who got their child actually totaled their car in a car accident, and they needed a new car, or new to them car. And I'm like, well, would you be interested in my car? I've I searched for a magical unicorn, the last car that I had, and I loved it. And so I wasn't eager to let it go, but I knew for a couple of years it was getting close and I'd been on the back burner. So I'm like, well, if I have a private buyer, it seems like maybe now is the time. And with the insurance settlement, I thought it would be at least a month, if not longer, before that insurance settlement closed. So I thought I had plenty of time to figure out what I wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted. That insurance claim would have closed in about 10 days or less, but she was out of town on vacation. I had less than 2 weeks to find my new car, to just figure out what I wanted to buy and locate it. The day that my car went to its new owner, I didn't have a new car yet. And I'm like, I'm going first. I've made the decision. The universe is going to support me. Everything's going to happen. And you better believe along the way, my brain was like, maybe you should trade it in and she can buy it from the dealer. Maybe you shouldn't do this at all. Maybe now isn't the right time to buy your car. But I was aware and I know how my brain works. And so every time my brain fired that suggestion, that offering to me, I'm like, nope, that's garbage. Thank you for offering me that. But that's not the solution to this. The solution to this is finding what I want, and it's going to come to me. It's going to happen. And the same day that my car went to its new owner, that afternoon, I signed the paperwork on my new car and I brought it home the next day. And so it all did fall into place, but my belief system, my awareness to what my brain was doing, and, holding that vision and the feeling of a new car, like calling all of that in is an art as well. And you have to be steadfast because you're going to be tested. Law of opposite. It's going to come first. So yeah, it's all about learning how we actually are wired as humans and how it works against us, like our imagination. Quickly, my last little tidbit of wisdom, worry. Worry is using your imagination. Your imagination is a really powerful part of your mind. Are you using your imagination to see your future and the things that you want to create and the goals you want to reach? Or are you allowing that worry of every possible scenario that could play out to consume your mind? Because if you are, you're using your imagination against yourself. But we don't really look at it that way until it's kind of broken down for us, as that's actually what's happening within our minds and our subconscious when we let the worry come up versus holding the faith, because faith and fear cannot exist in the same space. And so we have to return our minds and our focus to the faith of what we're creating. And that is all part of mastering the art of being human and creating the lives we desire, turning this adversity into adventure.
No, it's so true. And I love how you mentioned imagining, and I'm a big believer in manifesting and visualizing what you want. If you can't see it in your mind's eye, it's not going to happen, at least to some degree. You might not be able to see every aspect of it, but you got to be able to see a little bit for it to come into fruition. And I love everything that you mentioned there. I really do, and it's so true about worrying. It's like a down payment on a problem that we might not even face, like we might not even go through the situation. And I was young when my grandfather was the one who said this to me, and I was worried about not passing some test. And he was like, Amanda, you're stressing out over not passing this. And if you do, you would have stressed yourself out for nothing. And I was like, wow, it's so true. We might put ourselves through the stressful situation that we might not even have to go through. Like when the problem comes up, stress about it then. But before it's even a thing, so many of us get worked up about the what ifs. The what ifs of life. What if this? What if I do this and then this happens? Okay, well then when it does, cross the bridge when it comes. I don't know.
It's our brains, our subconscious, good intention of keeping us safe always. And so it's going to offer everything it can. But we just have to say, thank you. No, thank you. Got it handled.
I love that comment that you made.
And I also think that, honestly, thinking the negative emotions, thinking these thoughts that were like, no, they're laughable actually. But having that compassion for yourself versus like, oh, here I am doing it again. I used to be that girl. I roll myself 1,000 times over. Like, I cannot believe, really. And now I'm like, oh, look at me being human. Thank you. And no, thank you.
You're approaching it from a whole different type of place.
Like, can you talk to yourself the way you talk to your best friend? Like, would you eye roll your best friend and be like, are you serious? You're doing that again? That so often we'll do that to ourselves. Can you actually talk to yourself the way you would a best friend? I also embrace the sillies, like, oh, silly me. Oh, silly me. Look at what I did. I didn't mean to do that. Now what's my next move? It just makes it easier to laugh through life and, love yourself, for Pete's sake. You only get one of you. Might as well love you.
It's so true. And I love how you mentioned the best friend. I say that, or like a child, because so many of us wouldn't speak to children the way we speak to ourselves. Even if it's not your own child, like the things you say to yourself, would you say that to another 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old? Probably not.
Probably not.
So then it's like, don't say it to yourself. Like exactly like you said, you only get one of you. And the world and society will bow just down enough. Like we may as well love ourselves.
It's really cool to see when we embrace the positive approach to talking to ourselves, how the outside world will start reflecting that. And not perfectly. There's going to be the off person or whatever in the workplace or in the subway or whatever. But a lot more positive will come to you when that's your internal environment as well.
It's so true. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been awesome. I think the more and more we get to know each other, it seems we have parallel experiences in life in so many ways.
I know. It really, really does. Now, I'm curious. Have you heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
I have.
So he's got a podcast called On Purpose, and he ends it with 2 segments that I've incorporated in my podcast. And the first one is the many sides to us. There's 5 questions, and they need to be answered in 1 word each.
Let's do it.
First question. What is 1 word someone who was meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Intriguing.
What is 1 word that someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you as?
Compassionate.
What is 1 word you'd use to describe yourself?
Funny.
What is 1 word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you as?
Backward.
Okay. What is 1 word you're embodying right now?
Wow, that's a really good question because that shifts and changes so quick. And that is not one word answer. A piece.
Okay. Second segment is the final 5, and these can be answered in up to a sentence. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
Be yourself. You can't mess up your art.
Why is that the best?
Well, there's so many ways that we shame ourselves, try to change ourselves, try to be what we see other people being. And your life is your art. And no artist can mess up their art. And I think that offers us such a deep opportunity of self-acceptance that makes life really enjoyable.
Okay. What is the worst advice you've heard or received?
That I need to do something someone's way that worked for them.
What is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Achievements. And I would say I probably still value them, but the way I value them is very different. So I used to be a human doing versus a human being. And now I understand that the who that I become or the who that I be will allow me to do anything really that I choose or am meant to do, is fated, however you look at life.
Okay. If you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone was reading it, what would you want it to say?
I would want it to say that people always felt better after being in my presence or listening to my content, that there was impact in them having a better relationship with themselves as a result of knowing me.
If you could create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
There are no loss. So perhaps a little bit idealistic, but the why would be if we all had such radical self-leadership and that we were living in alignment with nature, with spirit, with God, with the way that we were designed as beings, rather than underneath all of this hurt and pain and trauma and generational things that get passed down to us. We wouldn't need laws. Really, at our core, we're beings who want to do good things and be bright lights in the world. And that would mean that everyone's living in their true essence. And so, again, perhaps a little bit idealistic, but if I were to make a world all my own, it would look like that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Of course. And now, where can the listeners connect with you?
So they can find me on my website, www.fiercelyradiantsoul.com. I also have a radio show every week. And so on my website, you can find archived episodes of Eyes Wide Open. And you can also find me on Facebook at Janessa Finley Ford or Fiercely Radiant Soul.
Awesome. I will link all of that in the show notes. And I do like to always leave it back to the guests. Any final words of wisdom, anything else you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, stop thinking, just go do. I feel like there's currently a lot of waiting, and maybe that's this time of year, season change, but I feel like most everyone I've been working with lately has been waiting rather than taking the inspired action. So whatever that's been wrestling around inside, those intuitive nudges you're getting about your next step or a bigger project, whatever that thing is, you're listening and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Go do it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Manders Mindset. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.